Today we're looking at Unchained Capital as a way to borrow against your Bitcoin. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And I've been pretty excited to do this video on Unchained Capital. I did a whole video in the past some time ago on an overall sort of framework to think about borrowing against your Bitcoin. We're going to get into that a little bit in this video, but if you are brand new to the topic or concept even of borrowing against your Bitcoin, I would encourage you to first check that video out. And so hit pause on this video, go check that out, and then come back. But I will briefly recap the sort of motivation for why one would want to do this. And then today we are going to dig into how to actually do it on the Unchained Capital platform. So you won't want to miss a thing. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends and brethren. As always, it is nothing short than a pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, I welcome you as well. I know there continue to be a lot of you. Over 80% of you watching right this very moment are not currently subscribed. And so if you like this content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our growing and merry gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin content, including wallet tutorials, other how-tos such as the video I'm doing today, news, analysis, Lightning Network, DeFi on Bitcoin, running your own node. You want it, I cover it. That is the name of this game. But with all that out of the way, let's jump in. And I first want to just go through an overview of Unchained Capital, a quick recap of the motivation behind why someone would want to do this, and then we'll get into the meat of things. So let's start with the motivation. Why would someone want to do this? Again, check out the video. I will link in the description down below for a more thorough rundown of this, as well as a kind of overall framework for the parameters and things you want to look for when considering perhaps alternatives to Unchained Capital, etc. But in very short and simple terms, borrowing against your Bitcoin is when you need to raise fiat. And this could be for many reasons, right? It could be for a medical emergency. It could be for an investment in starting up a company or a business. You know, the list goes on. And so depending on where you are on that spectrum, right? You know, we talk a lot about getting people off zero in terms of zero Bitcoin. But there's a lot of you out there who are closer to zero fiat. And so any number of reasons could generate the need to raise capital. And furthermore, borrowing against highly scarce assets is traditionally the secret weapon of the rich. And so imagine if you own, a piece of real estate in Manhattan. This is an incredibly valuable, scarce asset that is just going to go up in value over time, especially in the kind of monetary paradigm we have currently of fiat currencies. And so what the rich are able to do is basically live off of that scarce asset into perpetuity. And the way they do that is they borrow against the asset. And then let's say they borrow money for living the next year. And over the next year, that asset has appreciated in value. What they'll then do is they'll take another loan out. They'll pay the old loan off. And because the asset has appreciated in value, they're able to borrow even more this time. And so that's a massive way that the rich live off of their assets. The other thing here is if you really need to raise fiat, don't sell your Bitcoin as your, that should not be your first instinct. You should certainly sell your spare kidney if you have, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, you don't have to sell your Bitcoin. You can borrow against it. Why does this matter? There's no sort of tax implications for this, right? If you were to sell your Bitcoin, in theory, you have your capital gains, right? And so no one wants that. Ain't nobody got time for that. And so borrowing allows you to raise fiat in a way that doesn't generate a tax bill. Obviously, you're going to have interest to pay on that loan. But given Bitcoin's historical rate of appreciation, 170 to 200% compounded annual growth over the last decade, which wipes the floor with any other asset that you can name, this becomes a very good bet. None of this is financial advice, blah, 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 right? Obligatory callouts there. Again, check out my other video where I even go through a sort of calculation example of how this might look. But in any case, there's a very good reason for why you want to do this if you need to raise fiat. And there's several different options for how you can do this. I'm covering Unchained Capital today, and I personally think, I'm in no way affiliated with Unchained Capital, but I personally think they have probably by far the best offering for how to do this. And so let's break it down. Why is that the case? So firstly, Unchained Capital has been issuing loans against Bitcoin since 2017. And so that's, in the grand scheme of things, not that long ago. But in the realm of Bitcoin-backed loans, that is ages ago. And so they're one of the first movers within this space, can support individual and business accounts, including even Bitcoin from an IRA account, which is nice. But the single sort of crown jewel for Unchained Capital has to do with their collaborative custody model. And so what happens is they essentially have a 2 of 3 multi-sig setup for custodying your Bitcoin. So at least that means that you have one of the keys to this multi-sig wallet, and any 2 of those 3 keys, can unlock the funds to the Bitcoin. And so you are providing one of the keys, Unchained Capital has another, and then Citadel SPV, which is another sort of kind of custodial accounting player within the Bitcoin space and crypto space, has a third. All 3 of these parties have to have a hardware wallet in order to do this. And so your options for that currently include Trezor, Ledger, or Coldcard. So again, I think this is a significant improvement on other offerings, maybe something like BlockFi or anything where you're just wholesale sending your Bitcoin with no keys whatsoever to the funds. And we'll walk through a lot of that today. The other huge considerations, of course, come down to pricing. So what's my interest rate? What's the origination fee? Again, watch that other video where I go through all the kind of elements, but to rattle those off really quickly, you want to consider the interest rate. You want to consider the origination fee, which is usually about 1%. And so that's just literally the fee that, whatever service provider you're working with will take in order to, provide the service. You also sometimes have prepay or repayment fees if you repay the loan early. Fortunately, Unchained Capital does not have such fees, which is nice, and so on and so forth. And the next big piece is around loan to value and liquidation and sort of what that process looks like. And so loan to value ratio means the amount of loan or the amount of funds you can raise for every sort of dollar in value of the underlying collateral. And so Unchained Capital uses a ratio of 40%. And so if you flip that into the inverse, or what's called the collateral to principal ratio, this works out to 250%. And so what happens is if the value of the collateral asset goes down a sufficient amount, a sequence of actions is initiated that may ultimately culminate in what's called a liquidation, meaning your underlying collateral gets sold on the market in order to repay the loan so that the service provider can remain whole. And so that liquidation process begins at 150% collateral to principal. And so, once that trigger occurs, you have a few options. You can add additional collateral so that you have more of a buffer there. You can also pay some of the loan down so that you're back in balance. And then if that ratio continues to deteriorate at 110%, there is a forced liquidation of the collateral. And so it is your responsibility, right? There's a whole host of risks here. There is still the risk of losing your Bitcoin if you're not mindful about monitoring this and keeping the loan to value parameters and requirements in mind. Now, let's say you neither get liquidated nor pay the loan back early, and you just simply hold things to term, and you pay at the end of the loan term. You have a few different options. Of course, you can pay the loan back. You can roll that into a new loan, so the new loan would pay the old loan back. And again, as per what I was referring to earlier, if the value of the collateral has gone up significantly over that time frame, you'd be able to borrow, even more. So you'd be able to pay the old loan back plus borrow additional, whatever living expenses or whatever the case may be. And you have some other options as well. Now, all of this, I know I rattled through that relatively quickly, and that's because I've gone into it in more depth in that other video, and I'm going to link one of Unchained Capital's blog posts in the description down below that provides a really nice guide into all of this, including one other benefit I didn't mention, which is that Unchained Capital does not do rehypothecation. I'm going to let you do some homework and figure out what that means. Again, I will link that in the description down below. But be sure to read through that because it goes through kind of all the different categories of risk, et cetera, et cetera. So with all that overview and recap complete, let's move into the actual walkthrough and see what all of this looks like. So I'm on the Unchained website. It used to be unchained-capital.com, which still does redirect you to unchained.com, but they've simplified that. And so again, I will of course link this in the description down below. Just to orient you a little bit, they've got different sort of tabs here depending on whether you're thinking of this from a personal or business standpoint. They have actually a lot of really good resources here in their blog, knowledge base, etc. And then again, as I mentioned, I'm going to also link this specific blog post that is the sort of ultimate guide to Bitcoin-backed loans. This has a treasure trove of info, and I would urge you to read this before engaging with Unchained Capital or any other service provider. Now, we're just going to do this. We've never done this before, so we're just going to YOLO and see what it all looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and sign up, and I'll put this information in and be right back. All right, and as you can see, they've emailed me a confirmation link, so I'm going to go grab that. And there we go. So email address has been confirmed. I'll go ahead and log in. All right, so once I log in for the very first time, I am brought to this sort of dashboard. And so let's go ahead and choose the individual account, personal Bitcoin vaults and loans. I'll go ahead and put my country in and state. All right, and it plays back what services are available. So they do allow you to, I guess in some jurisdictions, perhaps buy Bitcoin. And you can also use Unchained Capital if you wish as a vault provider. You could do that independently of taking a loan out. Like you could create a multisig vault with Unchained Capital without necessarily, taking a loan out. So let's hit continue. And so as you can see, this is certainly not a non-KYC offering, as you would probably suspect. And so I'm going to put in this information and be right back. All right, and so once you complete these tier 2 details, as you can see, you would be able to create vaults, but then to apply for loans, you would need to complete their tier 3 profile. So let's take a look at what that entails. And you can see the kind of full breakdown here. So tier 1, basically nothing. Tier 2, you're able to create and deposit and withdraw from vaults, and then tier 3 is loans. So let's go ahead and start our tier 3 profile. And this looks like the excruciating all other detail. So I'll go ahead and fill this out, and we'll be back. All right, so once we've sent our firstborn child, we are now pending approvals. The final thing you'll do beyond the tier 3 information is just putting your bank account details so that Unchained Capital knows where they would send the fiat that you take out as a loan. So once these approvals get processed, we will be back. Actually, one of the things we can at least do while we're waiting is to go ahead and add our key. So the steps, the tiers really go in sequential order of the steps as well. So step 1 is we need to add our key that will be a part of the Multisig vault. And so the way to do that is to add, essentially to import the extended public key. I've done a lot of videos on different multi-sig tutorials, and I cover those concepts in more detail. But Unchained Capital appears to make this pretty easy. They say add new key, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. Name your key. A good key is easy to remember. I'll say ledger 1. Go ahead and hit next. And indeed, here we go. We've got ledger. These are the 3 options. And it says exporting the extended public key. Please plug in and unlock your ledger, then open the Bitcoin app. And so again, I've done tutorials on all but Trezor within these 3 if you are so curious. And I'll go ahead. I do have my ledger plugged in. I also have it, the Bitcoin app opened on it. And so I will say connect to ledger. And there it is. I'll hit connect. And there we go. There's my exported public key. And specifically, this is the exported public key that will enable or be supported in a multi-sig setup. So I'll go ahead and hit next. And it's just letting me review the information. And I'll go ahead and hit create. All right, so there we go. This is now in my keys section here on the left. And so interestingly, it looks like there is this key check. So we require you to perform a quarterly key check every 90 days. This key will be temporarily disabled. So that's interesting. So I guess you can just come in and check now. I'm assuming, yeah. So you would just go through the same flow there. So that's interesting. If you do this, set yourself a reminder. All right. So now that our key is uploaded, we are done for now until we are approved for the tier 2 and 3. And once that happens, we will be right back. All right. So I am all approved for both tier 2 and 3. And it was surprisingly quick. It only took a couple hours in my particular case. I don't know if that varies depending on the jurisdiction you are doing this from. I should make a note on that topic that right now it appears that Unchained Capital really only lends to folks in the U.S. And it does not appear that U.S. territories are supported. And there are some state-by-state differences. And so I will link in fact, here is the page that I'm referring to. I will link this in the description down below. But as you can see, most states are supported for consumer and business use. There's a handful that are business only, and then there's another handful where it appears there is no support. And then in terms of internationally, it does say Unchained Capital lends in some foreign countries. However, our lending capabilities are currently limited. And you can see the steps to take if you are so interested in doing that. So just a quick note there. Again, I'll link this in the description down below. But we are now good to proceed. So we've uploaded, as you'll recall, our key. So the key that we will use for our signature as part of the vault creation. And so now let's go ahead over to vaults. And we'll go ahead and hit new, create a new vault. Okay, so this is actually really interesting. So number 1, there is this client-controlled custody model wherein you're providing 2 of the keys in the 2 of 3 multisig. So that's really nice. And you can see the kind of subtext here, the benefits. You can withdraw or transfer funds on your own without Unchained Capital. Your second key can be operated by a trusted partner, colleague, or friend. Perfect for individual investors. And then note the pricing here, completely free during this limited release period. Now, I did a bit of research off to the side to try and determine what is kind of limited release period. Couldn't really find anything. So if anyone watching this knows, leave a comment down below. But this is interesting. If I figure this out, I'll come back and add it to the description of the video. But I think that's really, really interesting, because when you compare it to the custody model wherein you're providing only one key, and then Unchained Capital is providing one, and Citadel SPV is providing one. Now, of course, the benefits here, no single party can move your funds on their own, but you're, of course, in sort of less control. And as you can see, this is really designed for businesses needing treasury management. But the pricing here is notable, right? There's this one-time setup fee, which is steep, but all of these sort of custodial key setup fees are expensive. For example, if you're getting like an IRA that you're investing in Bitcoin, if they use a custodial solution like BitGo, it's going to be expensive. So that's really interesting. So let's do the client-controlled method. This is great, but in this case, we're going to need 2 keys. And so let's go ahead and hit next here. All right, so now that we've chosen that, it's asking who the default signers should be. So who should sign transactions? Note, you can always change this at a later time. And so do you want to basically make it so that the default is you? Your 2 keys are going to be the defaults. Or do you want to make it to where it's you and Unchained? So again, for sort of fuller kind of sovereignty. Now, like, a lot of you watching may think, oh my gosh, like, what an obvious choice. I would, of course, pick sign on your own. But keep in mind, there's going to be others of you, or perhaps business entities, that actually want to have, someone like an Unchained Capital being a co-signer. This sign on your own, of course, carries with it more responsibility, in the sense that if I lose my keys somehow, then there's not much that, there's really nothing that Unchained Capital can do. And so, but we're going to go ahead and choose sign on your own. And we will name this as the default here, vault number 1. You can always change this later. All right, now we need to pick our keys. So I'm going to go ahead and click pick a key. Now, of course, we had added our Ledger 1 key earlier, so I need to add another one. And there are a number of options, right? You could use a Trezor device, you could use a cold card device. What's really nice that I've confirmed is that, for example, if you want to use your cold card, you can do that in an air-gapped fashion. So you can export the extended public key from your cold card. I've done a number of videos on how to do that, and I'll just show you the example, right? So if I were to say cold card 1, next, cold card, you'll see it provides instructions for how you can do that. So you'd go to settings on your cold card, multisig wallets, export xpub, and this is going to export the appropriate extended public key that can be used with multisig setups. Now, to make this just a bit easier for purposes of this video, I'm just going to use my second Ledger device. Just a little bit easier without having to, do the air-gapped method with the cold card. And I'm only going to be really playing around with this vault just to kind of see how it works. And so the amount of funds I'm going to be, playing with here is not going to be much. No shade at Ledger, but I do think it's an inferior product to the cold card. I don't have as much experience with Trezor, but that's my kind of personal opinion. But let's go ahead and add Ledger 2. We'll go ahead and hit next. We'll hit Ledger, and I'll get this plugged in. All right, so I've got the device plugged into my computer. Let me go ahead and hit connect to Ledger. And there it is. All right, so we've chosen the one key. Let's pick the other one. And of course, it is the first key that we uploaded. And so there's our setup. So we've got the 2 ledgers, and then as a backup, we've got the Unchained Capital key. Let's go ahead and hit next. And this all looks good. Let's take a look at what the Vault service agreement is. All right, so basically it goes a little bit into fees and responsibilities, things like that. Now, presumably we don't have to worry about some of that given the configuration here. We are going with the sort of user-owned custody model. So let's go ahead and agree to the terms and create the vault. Okay, this is really nice. I was actually going to mention this at some point. I'm glad they make it really, really clear. So if you're using a cold card, but particularly if you are doing that in an air-gapped fashion, so let's say you had just exported the extended public key from your cold card to your micro SD card, and you pulled that over, and that was the key you imported to be one of your vault signers, you need to convey the information back to the cold card that a multi-sig vault is being created with it as one of the signers. That's what this step that you see here would do. It would communicate that back to the cold card. So again, we're not doing that. We're not using that. Although if you are, I'm assuming this goes into helpful steps. Let's just see. Yeah, right. It tells you how to do this. You would download the file. You would go to settings, multi-sig wallets, and import from the SD card. So that is nice. This is real clean. I think Unchained Capital has done a very nice job here with the user interface. And so here we go. We've got our vault. So right off the bat, looks like we can deposit. Of course, there's nothing to withdraw. There's nothing to transfer. And we can see that we've got our client-controlled setup, etc. It looks like there's this verification threshold, so percentage between 0% and 100. When you withdraw or transfer funds from this vault, if the amount of your transaction exceeds this threshold, we will ask you to record a video verification. Interesting. We will not co-sign any transactions exceeding your threshold until we can confirm your identity. So again, that's a nice feature. And again, I think this is very appropriate for, if you're like using this, if you have a business entity and you're using this to hold, Bitcoin on your balance sheet, and you want to transfer a large portion of that, this seems helpful. But let's go ahead and deposit some funds. So we'll hit deposit. All right, and so it's going to give us a address. It's a 2 of 3 multi-sig pay to script hash address. So we'll go and hit show address. So we'll go ahead and copy this. I'm going to send some funds over from a different wallet, and we will be right back once that confirms. We've got a confirmation on our 2 million sats that we sent over to our vault. And we can now see this new section, transaction history, at the bottom right. And so that is all good. And you can now see we also now have options to withdraw or transfer, presumably to, if you had multiple vaults, etc. So very good, very, very clean. Let's now finally check out the loan section. So we'll say new. All right, so we found the catch pretty quickly there. So it's not a catch, but it's just a high amount. So basically you can see the minimum collateral amount is a little over 1/3 of a Bitcoin. And so this would correspond to a 2.5x of 10,000 as the bare minimum principal. So that's how they're doing these calculations. The bare minimum that you can borrow is 10,000 against what would essentially be 2.5x of that, quantified in however much Bitcoin that equates to at the time. So honestly, I just don't need that much fiat right now. Maybe I'll come back and do a future video where I actually, go through the rest of this. But yeah, I'm just not going to do that right now. I have no reason to. And so we'll kind of stop this here. I will flash up the some of the different pricing parameters. I believe these are as up to date, or they're as up to date as I have found. They may deviate very slightly based on what you would see. But as you can see, you essentially have different term values. So you would select the term. Of course, the term will dictate or influence the interest rate. And these look pretty reasonable with what you'd expect. And then you have the origination fee as well, that starts quite low at 50 basis points and goes all the way up to 100. And so that, gets you to your overall APR. As we discussed, Unchained Capital does not have fees associated for repayment. And really the only other thing we stumbled across was just be advised of those fees that we saw associated with the custody model, wherein it's you with one key, Unchained with another, and then Citadel SPV with a third. There was the upfront $500, I think it was, setup fee for that, as well as a kind of small holding fee as a percent of whatever it is that you have in the vault. So we'll go ahead and leave this here. I do still think this is best option out there, with the main con being availability in terms of jurisdictions, right? Like this is just not, as we discussed earlier, not very available internationally, and there's certainly state-by-state restrictions as well. But hopefully that improves over time, particularly as Bitcoin continues its inexorable climb. And the other main con is that if you're just doing this for like personal reasons, the 10K minimum in fiat borrowing can be high. So I think this is, and we saw the platform here is pretty slick. And with the variety of custody models, I really don't think you can beat that. I have looked at other sort of documents for this, and it looks like the process is really, really clean. Like after this, you basically put in the collateral amount, you specify the term. There's a few other little parameters, and then there's some kind of an application document that you have to review and look at the terms and sign and all that good stuff. I do think if you're a company, the loans are up to 3 years. And then for individuals, again, it's the min of 10,000 and a max of $1 million in fiat. And once the application is complete, signed, etc., Unchained would take a couple business days, maybe a week or so, to kind of, approve the loan. And once that happens, you then have the fiat deposited in your traditional bank account that we linked earlier in the setup process. So net, really love what Unchained Capital is doing. So maybe in the future, when we need it, we will come back and do another video where we go through the full steps. But really after this, there's not an awful lot to cover. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and close this video out. All right, my friends, there you have it. We covered a lot of ground as we always do. But just as a quick recap, we went into an overview of Unchained Capital. I really do think they are the best option currently, at least, for borrowing against your Bitcoin. We talked about the motivation behind why someone might want to do that and the benefits that it carries versus, of course, selling your Bitcoin. Why would you ever, in your right mind, want to do that? We then talked about some of the different key elements that you need to think about, whether it's with Unchained Capital or others. And then we showed the walkthrough as well. So I'm curious to hear what you think. What do you think of Unchained Capital? What do you think of borrowing against your Bitcoin? Are there other providers or services that you'd like to see covered in future videos? Let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you found this valuable and useful. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave this here. As always, my friends, every sat counts, especially those that you don't have to sell to raise fiat if needed. And until next time, I'll see you then.